back. James Harden right on target. Bang, bang, George Niang to Paul Reed from Tyrese Maxey.
Joel Embiid.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pick Swap podcast. It's been a little bit since I've been on the show. We've had a busy Flyer season so far, but I'm back and I'm here with Sean Barnard as usual. Sean, how you been, man?
Yeah, you might have made the right decision going on prioritizing the Flyers lately, James. I'll say that much. Yeah.
That's a big statement, especially these days. But yeah, it's been a little bit rough recently with the Sixers here. Want to shout out the Phillies. Trey Turner is a Philly. Sure. What an interesting turn of events that this has been over the last year for that team. But the Sixers, to get back to them, tough loss last night in Houston. Harden's return to the court and return to Houston as well. Embiid has been back for a little bit, but they reunite on the court. Double overtime loss to the Rockets. Pretty brutal game for the most part. I don't even know where you want to start, but if you just want to kind of overview what you took away from last night.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off with going double overtime to the 6-17 Rockets entering that game should basically count as a loss in itself. And then just to put that icing on the cake, Sixers made sure they got in the loss column. Embiid fouled out at the tail end of the first overtime. Just a mess, one that like we've seen for plenty of times with this Sixers team, kind of sleptwalk through, kind of looked overmatched. And Harden, we saw the downside of the Harden ball, the ISO ball, hero ball down the stretch. Both Embiid and Harden making some crucial mistakes for this team, which absolutely sucked to watch. And it's not good vibes right now. We saw Harden get back to the court, which I was looking at as like the first step toward, I guess, this team starting to build. I obviously didn't think it was going to fully click his first time back, but pretty discouraging on what we've seen. And there are some real concerning trends and themes with this team being put on full display.
Yeah, last night I got home about halfway through the game, so I watched the second half and then into overtime. And man, like it's so night and day the way that they attack offensively when it's down the stretch. And I genuinely don't understand the point of all of this. The point of being a contender and putting together a great roster is being able to trust the guys around you and play a team brand of basketball. That all that goes out the window. And like, I know we can blame James Harden. I definitely think that yesterday, at times he wanted to be the guy to make the shot, and can you blame him? Not really, but there was a lot of bad shots being taken, and Joel Embiid, I think, deserves as much blame. Two pretty brutal, like absolutely terrible off 1 foot jumping in the air, throwing the ball to nobody out of bounds. 2 possessions in a row in the first overtime that, you can't turn the ball over twice in a row in OT. Embiid did it. But again, it kind of all falls back on Doc Rivers, I think, to a degree. Yesterday, just like they have no idea what to do in crunch time. And this has been a consistent theme. They get hurried up. They look like they're on their heels the whole time. And like guys like D'Anthony Melton and Tobias Harris touched the ball 0 times. And when they did, both of them had one opportunity to score in those overtime periods, and they both capitalized. I just don't understand why you don't trust those guys a bit more. But overall, just a pretty brutal, pretty ugly loss.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on like the stats purely real quick, Embiid ended with 39.7 rebounds, 3 assists. It's just straight up inexcusable for him to have 7 rebounds in 35 minutes of play. He had 4 rebounds till very late in that fourth quarter. Just like on a game in which we got dominated on the boards throughout. As a team, it was 51-39. The Rockets out-rebounded the Sixers. Rockets got 16 offensive rebounds, which is also like a theme. One of the worst games I've seen Embiid play, despite the 39 points, despite all that, it was the not locked in on defense, which I thought we turned a corner on. The same thing that we saw at the start of the season. There was the turnovers. Harden and Embiid combining for 12 turnovers. Harden was 7 of those on his own. Harden shot 0 for 8 inside the 3-point arc last night. Shot 4 for 19 on the game. It's just one of those that's straight up not good enough. And I kind of, as we kind of prefaced this episode and what we talked about, I kind of had 3 things that I wanted to hammer down as far as what's really limiting this team, because I think it's pretty clear we're looking at the same exact Sixers team that is still flawed, that is not in the true contending category, and it's super frustrating because it was built up to the point where I thought we were past that. And the 3 areas that I wanted to touch on, I'm just going to get one out of the way because that's the one I think we're going to have the least on. The roster construction as a whole, for me, the biggest weakness in this team was just there's still not enough athletic wing defenders, guys that can just like guard an opposing team's best perimeter threat. We're not even getting to the point where that's what's limiting us. Like I expected that to be, we get to the postseason and that's going to be like our downfall. We're not even getting to that point. So to kind of wipe that out there. And then I'll start off with you on just kind of getting your feeling for the vibe. So if we're going to put these two as kind of the root issues, what do you think of the Harden and Embiid kind of duo, and how much does Doc Rivers have to do with that?
Yeah, I think to me, and this is the frustrating part, is like they work so well in certain situations and they work well together. And we saw them at it just felt like at the beginning of or Harden's tenure here, when he got traded here, finally got healthy, and that like 10 or 12 game stretch, they looked and played so well together. There was no ego. There was no I need the ball. There was no isolation. It was just good basketball and ball movement, and Harden taking kind of a sidestep in terms of trying to develop different parts of his game. And we've seen him kind of go into that. Bad game last night from him, right? Like really no two ways about that. But he was really good at the beginning of this year, and he's coming off, that injury. Like I think that there's going to be some time there, but I think it's just frustrating to watch them struggle playing on the court together, because they shouldn't. They shouldn't play poorly together. They actually mesh pretty well. And the fact that James Harden has added that mid-range game, obviously you said he was 0 for 8 last night, so that's not great, but he was willing to add that, and he did. I think it might, and I don't know how this is going to sound, and maybe this is going to come off the wrong way, but I think it might be Embiid's turn to kind of not change his game, but mold it a little bit differently to fit this offense and move the ball a little bit more and be okay with just being part of a play rather than, needing the ball at certain positions. So I think Doc Rivers has a play in that, just because I don't think that they should struggle together. I think that they should work well together, because Harden is such a good, smart, and willing passer and a great playmaker. And I think it's just time for all of the guys to buy into that one goal. And like you said, I know you mentioned the vibes a bit. It seems like there might be some disconnect there, and I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think we're seeing we talked all about it before the season, about like a kind of a prove it year for James Harden, proving he's still got it. I think we're seeing a little bit of the negative side of that, of him kind of wanting to be the man a little bit. And to some respects, like, and first off, like, I don't mean that purely as an issue. Like, there's room for that on the Sixers team. There are shots for James Harden to go get himself, to create his own look, but it can't be this my turn, your turn with him and Embiid. There has to be a way where these two are maximizing each other and bringing out the best in each other, not just kind of like sharing the court, and while the other three guys just stand around. Like the pure isolation ball. And if we want to circle back to this shorthanded stretch where the Sixers look so good, and frankly were the most fun to watch that they have been all season, that's what it was about. Was the ball was popping, the ball was shifting around. That's all out the window with these two back on the court. And it frustrates me, because it just should be better than this. Like, there isn't a reason why Embiid and Harden aren't working. And I think, to be honest, I'm putting more of it on these two than I am on Doc as a whole. I think Doc should do more as far as calling plays, making sure things are being run like that. But there just has to be a point where these two kind of look each other in the eye and be like, let's figure this out. Like, let's find a way where we can bring out the best in each other. And that just doesn't look to be happening. Even that, like, the final play, the one that got blocked, that just looked bizarre from Harden. Like, it was like Embiid like running to him to get the ball. Like, he set the screen, popped, and then is like chasing him to get the ball in his hands. And Harden just kind of like ignored him, took a step back that was like blocked. Or originally I thought he passed out of it, which I was even more mad about. But either way, like there just has to be a way where they're creating for each other. And like the pick and roll, they still run it a decent bit, but like, it's not like that needs to be like the crux of everything. Like, you two should be involved on every single play and find ways to build off that. And it's just not connecting. And like the whole, like, it's been a theme, like them not fitting. We saw it in the Key Pompey article a little bit, that little nugget, stuff like that. And I haven't bought into it. And I still frankly don't, because like they should be better than this. There has to be a way to make them better than this, but it's just not like looking that way.
Yeah. And there's two folds to this. If I can liken it to something else that we've seen work really well, like it's almost like the Eagles and their run game and their pass game. Like, you see certain games against the Titans, terrible pass defense, and Jalen Hurts throws the ball for 350 yards. Game before, they're playing a bad run defense, they run for 350 yards. Like, it's got to be one of those things where you're both secure enough in the fact that you can dominate games and take over at certain parts. It's got to be points in time in games and opponents and things like that. They're going to dictate who has the game, right? Or being a part of it, something that, whether it's D'Anthony Melton, who's been playing incredibly, or Tobias Harris, who played really well last night. And like I said, like he didn't get a single look in those OT periods. Like there makes no sense to me. That guy was 7 of 9 from 3 or 7 of 10 from 3, something
7 of 8.
7 of 8 from 3. Like that's a great Tobias game. And you let that walk away because you refuse to allow him to be part of the game plan in those situations. Like this team has to buy into winning basketball games the way that they did before Harden and Embiid came back, and realize within this fact that this team is good enough to compete, but in order to compete at a longer level, everybody has to contribute. And I don't know why it's like such a difficult thing for them. Like I mean this genuinely, like no exaggeration at all. Like in those overtime periods, it was standing in corners, standing on the wing, standing in the dunker, and Embiid at the free throw line and Harden isolating.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't Harden isolating, it was passing it to Embiid at the free throw line who was isolating. And that's, honest to God, the only thing that they did. That is a travesty. That you cannot do that in basketball. And then you watch the Rockets run down the court with all these young athletic guys that are sharing the ball and being aggressive and cheering each other on. And then it's like, how the hell are they being able to do that? These guys are not that good. We're walking down the court, dumping it into the free throw line and taking contested jumpers every single time down the floor. Just, it's not a way to win basketball games. And there's no way that you can expect to win basketball games doing that.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to me, is you can't expect to win like that. Like, it's just impossible. This is the NBA, and both these guys have kind of been through it in their own kind of stretches. We saw everything built around Harden where that was the model, and it did work for a brief period of time. Like, that Rockets team, I honestly think is better than it's even getting credit for. Like, they put up some real fights, made some real runs, took that Warriors team to 7 games. It had success, but didn't quite get over the edge for a reason. And same with the Sixers. Like, Embiid, you've been through this where there's nobody to help you. You've been through where you're trying to put the team on their back. This team specifically was designed so it wouldn't be the case. This year specifically is the first year where each of these guys was brought out to like maximize you. This is the first time that like we've kind of made the Ben Simmons thing mix in the past, but there's always been players that were kind of just signed for Ben. Like, you dated back to like the Al Horford thing of wanting that like stretch big to pair with him. All that like there's been players specifically for Ben that have been a little bit at the detriment of Embiid. It's no longer the case. Like, this is your show to run. And like, if I'm talking about Embiid specifically, there's 2 things specifically that are driving me crazy. It's one is the defensive stuff. Like, you just have to be better. And I get we're asking a lot out of him. Like, all these goals of a defensive team, like there's some very poor defensive players on this team if we're going to be an elite defensive team. Like, Embiid at his best, there was a play last night in the Rockets where they got 2 back-to-back offensive rebounds that ended with Embiid like coming up with a block and saving the play. And it's like that's great. I'm glad you did that, but that just can never happen. And we just have to like execute that. Yeah. And also with Embiid, there's a little more like, I want you to figure out who you are more. Like, I think he's trying to be like Nikola Jokic at times. Like, he's trying to be this guy that can pass, that can do it all. You're not quite good enough to go and create your own shot out of off your own handle. Like, you just don't have that type of dribble bag, which is fine because you can do all these other things. So go do those other things incredibly well. Go post up, go create in the mid range, do your little walk into a mid range jumper that you can hit at a 65% rate. Like, that stuff's fine. But him trying to do these additional things to, in my opinion, kind of like prove he can do it. It's like I don't care about that. Go do what you're good at. We have other guys who can kind of do those things, and it's kind of turning into a mess because of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think like, I don't know where it comes from. Again, it's hard to like make assumptions about certain things, but like even there was a time Harden did hit that like step back jumper later. It might have been in the 4th quarter, maybe in that first OT period to tie the game. And it was off of an Embiid like spin fadeaway towards the baseline. And then he just turned and whipped it to Harden. Don't get me wrong. It was an on point, on target, on time pass that ended up in a score. That is the worst thing that you could do. If I'm under a minute and I see Joel Embiid 360ing out of a fadeaway jumper to throw a skip pass to James Harden, like, it makes me want to pull my hair out. Like, that should not be the outcome of that play. And again, as much as we're saying this, like with 1.8 seconds left or whatever it was, where they did get a timeout and a chance to run a play out of a timeout from the sideline at like half court, the best she got was a contested jumper from James Harden, like 5 feet behind the 3-point line. Like, you got to be able to do better than that. And maybe we should have gone to somewhere else. Like, I don't know, man. I just think that there's yesterday was really like a microcosm for the way that these games have kind of played out, and we see a lot of these, and it's kind of the stuff that has plagued the Sixers for multiple years. And it's hard to point fingers because it's like there's only so many guys remaining that have been here through the things, and like the two of them are and Embiid and Doc Rivers. So I don't know, man. Like, do you think Embiid hates playing for Doc? Like, is there something else happening here? Like, he doesn't look like he's enjoying himself.
Yeah, no, he hasn't all season really, except for some brief stretches. The Doc stuff, like he's had opportunities where he can definitely blame Doc a little more, and he's taken some jabs in the past at guys, whether it's Simmons, whether who like he's had his moments where he's not shy to throw a little bit of blame on people, which I honestly don't have an issue with as a guy who has as much responsibility in the organization as Joel Embiid does to kind of let that fly, let your opinion known. That hasn't been the case with Doc Rivers. He's had chances and honestly has backed up Doc more than anything. The
Yeah.
stuff that I think I blame on Doc more than anything is, and Doc kind of admitted this himself, where like he's like, when you have your stars, you kind of know what the sets you're going to run. When you're undermanned, you're kind of doing, I guess, your job harder. So,
Yeah.
which wasn't a great quote for me to read, or I didn't feel good about. But for the Embiid specifically, where I think Doc kind of rubs off on him is this like little arrogancy, little like entitlement kind of ability. And like this team has not won shit. Like nobody on this team deserves the ability to sleepwalk through a game. Doc Rivers included that. Doc Rivers winning his championship however many years ago with the Celtics when he had 4 All-Stars. That's not the same thing as this current team. Like you have to do an impressive job of coaching this team. It's hard to win a championship in the NBA. And I get like wanting to like theoretically sleep through the regular season and then flip the switch and you're great in the postseason. Very few teams are good enough to do that. And nobody on the Sixers team has earned the right to be able to do that. So every game should be looked at as taking strides to get closer to the championship level team that they desire to be. And they're just not showing that desire, the willingness. And I personally put that on Doc as kind of a reflection thing. I think that kind of energy, I put way more on his responsibility than most of the tactical stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And again, like, you look around the league and you look around at the teams that are like energetic and they're, great defensive teams and teams that are clearly bought in and locked in and have, some sort of identity and are going forward, with something. And I think that's where this gets misconstrued, is like the frustration between you and I and a lot of the fans that you see is like, obviously this team is good. Obviously the team is star power. They have the ability to get far into the playoffs. But this year and last year, even like it feels like we've been in this purgatory of, sleep, like you said, sleepwalking and being lazy and being unconcerned and feeling like they deserve to win and have all of these things like handed to them. And it's like that is consistent with Doc Rivers. And I think that's, consistent with blowing leads and going from LA and all the things that have happened there. Like all that kind of is consistent. And then you look around the league and all the other teams that, have that identity. It feels like even through losses and tough stretches, they still lean on that identity and lean on that ability to have energy and be a good defensive team and, care about each other in the game. Like those type of things that carry you through a season don't seem to be consistent with the Sixers team. And that's just really frustrating because like the team is really good. On paper, they should be really good. Yeah. And they should be beating these, not as good teams. And obviously they've gone through a tough stretch and injuries have really hurt them. And I think that in my mind, I'm still going to stay a little bit below that level of, frustration and hating this team, as I feel like a lot of Sixers fans get to. And trust me, I've been there to and from. But like, let's see how the rest of it plays out, man. But they're not giving me much hope as of right now. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So where do we go from here, James? Do you think it is just like you let things play out? We let the chemistry build. We let this team try and figure itself out, or is there moves to be done or stuff that like needs to change? Do you think for this team to have a legitimate chance?
Yeah. So it's tough. I think, looking back at the stretch of time where they didn't, a lot of these guys were hurt. Like D'Anthony Melton showing, like, I love him with the starters. Like obviously Tyrese is going to come in and play, and be that player, but god damn, dude, he is just like the perfect fit along that team. I love him. The Shake Renaissance, his comeback has been fantastic. I never wavered. I want to put that on paper. We've loved Shake from the start. I've been a Shake guy even when Shake wasn't the guy. But Shake's been pretty good. He's going to have some minutes to have. I think that's been good for them. So I think part of it has been like some of these guys are coming up, but they could definitely use another wing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's just the way that things are. Unfortunately, I don't like. There was a report today, like it doesn't seem like Doc's going anywhere.
Yeah.
No matter how much you and I and the rest of this fan base is calling for his head, like I think it's at the very least he gets through this year. So like honestly, like I've stopped like thinking about it too much. You know what I mean? Like I've stopped like it's not an option in my head until the end of this season, so I'm just gonna push that off. But yeah, man, I hope they add some pieces. There's guys out there to be had. Like I texted you the other day about Malik Beasley and guys like that are out there, man. Like they're not obviously they're hard to come by at times, but there's guys out there to be had. So I think it'd be nice to go get a guy like that, supplement some portion of your team, whether it's the bench or God knows what you do with the starters. I don't know, but I don't know, man. It just feels like they're going to end up going through this season, maybe adding a piece or two and doing the same thing that we've been doing for the last, since we started doing this podcast.
Yeah, it definitely does feel that way. First, let me touch on the Shake stuff since that's a little more positive than where I'm going to go with the next thing. I do think Shake Milton might end up being one of the keys to this team's success.
Yeah.
And the reason that I do feel that way is looking at how this is constructed. And now, granted, the best case scenario and honestly the only real way I see this Sixers team taking that leap to contender is if Harden and Embiid can just figure this out.
Yeah.
If that's not looking like the case, the thing I think you kind of have to do is you're pretty much are breaking them up throughout the game. And I think that's honestly how I'd run a rotation right now is you start and end the game with both Harden and Embiid on the floor. Without it, you kind of have units that you run with each of these guys. And Harden can have his kind of Rockets plus kind of unit. And that I think Maxey and Melton are the two guys I think can play with either one. Tucker, I think, can play with either one too. But those guys can kind of rotate. I'm keeping Shake with Embiid pretty much 100% of the time that they're on the court because Milton can make that little pocket pass that Embiid loves. Embiid's openly talked about how he likes playing with Shake. Shake brings like a creation ability and Maxey obviously is a key part in this and coming back and how everything's staggered. But I think there's something to the Shake and Embiid duo that the Sixers should look to tap into and look to utilize more. So I do think like his renaissance is not something to be overlooked. And he's a guy that deserves minutes in this rotation. We talked all year about the lack of ball handling, lack of playmaking. That's Shake Milton. He's doing other things in addition to just scoring the basketball, which this team needs. To look kind of beyond that and looking at like the missing piece stuff, I hate to like bring up the Tobias Harris stuff again, but I don't see a way that they can kind of make a championship leap with Toby as the pure 3/4, whatever you want to call him. And it's more like it's not even Toby's fault. I give him a ton of credit. His catch and shoot numbers, shooting 59.3% off the catch and shoot as an effective field goal percentage, which is pretty nutty, pretty good stuff. And doing things that he's never really been able to. And just the 7 for 8 from 3 last night is tremendous. But like looking at what they need, what this Sixers team needs is a guy who can guard like a perimeter. Like, how are we matching up with the Boston Celtics? Who's like, it's just not happening. Who's guarding Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? Like, we got PJ Tucker and D'Anthony Melton, I guess, but then you're still kind of squinting the rotation around to make that even possible, to give them that many minutes. And then also just rebounding. Neither Tobias or Joel Embiid are particularly good rebounders. Embiid, who is obviously 7 foot and is always going to rake up rebounds. But when's the last time you actually saw him like box out, get position, and go up and get it? There was a play last night against the Rockets, which drove me crazy. It bounced like a little bit over Joel, and D'Anthony Melton was like in the area. So he just kind of like let Melton try and go up and get it. And one of the Rockets players like got a hand in, the ball hit the floor, and then Embiid's like diving on the floor and going for it. And it's like, I guess great, you're diving, but like, dude, if you just go up and get that yourself, like nobody else can. Like you're that big and like just take that responsibility. So I think if there's a guy, if it's whether it's I love Malik Beasley, I think he'd be a good fit. Jonathan Isaac's a guy that I think could sneaky be a good version of that as well. But a guy that can just defend, get rebounds, and like do that kind of thing is absolutely what this team's missing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I want to ask you this, and I feel like I'm going to know your answer, and it might be something that we've talked about in previous times, but I was talking to my roommate last night watching the game, and was like, damn, man, I wish they would pay Paul Reed next to Embiid way more. I wish that they would give that more of a shot. There hasn't been that much opportunity to do it this year. But with the fact that you have some other bigs and you can be, unique and creative with those rotations and everything, I just feel like at certain times of the game, with the fact that Embiid's just not a great rebounder and, sometimes will lack energy at certain points of the game, Paul Reed's like he's never going to ask for the ball. He's just going to be running all over the place, offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, steals. He's a guy that can guard anybody, at any time, and he's willing to and eager to. So obviously, I know like the PJ Tucker role is similar, but like Paul Reed is just a much different player, and commands a different sort of attention from the defense. And I just feel like it might work. I feel like there might be just enough quirkiness and weirdness to that combination that like it just might be a really intense front court on both ends of the floor. And I don't know, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely open to giving it a shot. I love Paul Reed, man, and
Yeah.
like just watching him play, I've never seen this guy take a single second off on the court. Like it's amazing. Like you watch
Yeah.
the Sixers will take a shot, he will go up and try and get the offensive rebound. If he does not get his hands on it, which he oftentimes does,
Yeah.
he's then like you watch his eyes, he's just tracking wherever the ball is. Like he's running
Yeah.
down the court, like veering to the left, looking over there, looking for the ball. Like he's always just like lurking for it. And I love that. And the Sixers need that. They don't have enough guys who do that. And like it's absolutely worth experimenting with. And I'm a little bit at the point where I'm like, what does this team have to lose? Like if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Like we're a quarter of the way in the season and what we are doing isn't working so far. So give it a shot. Like that's kind of the type of thing that I'm talking about, is having like a little bit of like Embiid essentially plays as like a huge wing right now. Is kind of how he
Yeah.
wants to play, his style of play. So put another big man on the court. Let's give it a shot. And there's certain matchups where it definitely wouldn't. Like I wouldn't say it's an every game thing by any means,
No.
but like give it a chance on a night like last night where we're getting out rebounded, where we're getting out muscled. And this also comes back to a little bit of the Doc Rivers things of like it shouldn't be a surprise that the Rockets are active on the offensive boards. They're young, athletic, hungry, and they've been in the top numbers for offensive rebounding all season. Like the prep work should have been there on that one. That's one. Same with like the Grizzlies. Like when we face off with the Grizzlies, it's like they're always good at offensive rebounding. The Raptors too, always good at offensive rebounding. Like these aren't. You should be able to pick up on that going in, make those adjustments. So that also kind of circles back to it. But yeah, I think last night would have been a time where it might have worked. And that kind of flexibility, there has to be more just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks at this point, because what we got right now isn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't ever seem like it could hurt to try. And with a guy like, I think Paul fits in a lot of different lineups. And I know we talked about this forever during the offseason and what he brings, but like he looks really polished. He looks good, man. He looks
got better.
like
He definitely got better.
I think that we came into the season like expecting him to play and look good. Like he doesn't make as many, like the mistakes have been cutting down. Like they're still there, but you take the mistakes that he makes because it's just like it's not because he's being a dumbass. It's like he's just trying really hard, and sometimes the effort's placed in the wrong spot, and that's okay. And I think that he's just such a breath of fresh air on this team. And I have maybe not even intentionally noted the two guys I did want to talk about in positive lights. We went from being pretty mad and we're kind of veering into like a pretty good feeling right now. So I don't know, man. It's a weird situation right now. They're 500. Like I just don't know. Like it's just gonna feel like we're gonna get through the halfway through the season, 3/4 of the way through the season, and be like they're still figuring it out. It's they're still ramping up and all this stuff, and it's just never gonna be, the blame is never gonna hit hard enough because there's just like always an excuse, and it just feels like the experience, the full experience that we've had with Doc Rivers. There's always something that could be different, but it's Doc, and the excuses just flow in. It's just really like exhausting.
Yeah. Also, RIP the hopes of the Montrezl Harrell experiment too. That just beyond what I can imagine. When the guy who's notoriously been bad at defense throughout his career is also shooting below 50% at the rim, just not a good mix whatsoever. And I'm blown away by just how washed up Montrez looks, and I don't think there's any real hope of that changing throughout the season. Do you?
No, probably not. Probably not, man.
Yeah. And one more thing I did want to point out too is, I think this Sixers team needs the energy and heart of Tyrese Maxey way more than it's given credit. I think his absence has been extremely notable during the stretch, especially in games like last night. But there's also the other side of that to me, which there's a flaw in the thought process of, if the Sixers are going to be this defensive team, I just don't see it with a Maxey Harden backcourt. Like neither one of these guys are ever going to be stellar defenders. I even think Maxey might be able to become an average defender, but like he's still limited just because of his size, because of like he's 6'2" and pretty slender of size. He's gained a little bit of weight, but like he's just not going to be able to guard a lot of people. And he tries. Harden, I guess, it's more you can nitpick as far as like the effort stuff. And for Harden specifically, and this is also comes with like the passing of the torch and understanding your role. There was a time in James Harden's career where he was so good offensively and did so much offensively that like you could kind of overlook the defense. We're not in that spot anymore, man. Like you have to at least defend. Like, and I don't care about the post defense stuff. Like, dude, like you're gonna be asked to guard guards, so you have to be able to move. You have to be able to chase guys off screens, and that absolutely has to happen. But do you think this team can really be an elite defensive team with those two as the backcourt?
I think it's tough because of how like you said, like when Embiid's locked in and PJ Tucker's done a really good job as well.
Yeah.
That front court defensively has been really good. So I think that at times like it won't matter. But yeah, man, it's really tough. And like again, as much as Tobias tries and he has improved as a defender, like he's still not a top tier defender. So you pair like James Harden, who's like a notoriously lackadaisical defender, with Tyrese Maxey, who's just like critically undersized, and then you add Tobias Harris, who's like just not there defensively. It's a tough combination, and I think that they like it's going to be a struggle. It's always going to be, especially against teams and players that are really efficient beyond the 3-point line and on the perimeter, which is where the game is geared to. So it's not great. I'll tell you that. I don't know that they can ever be a great defensive team with that front court, but we've seen them become a really solid defensive team at times. And when they like, it sucks because I'm going to keep saying it, but it's like when they're locked in, I wish it wasn't such a question of when they will be. But when they are, like, I think they are a really solid defensive team. I know PJ Tucker said, if we're the best defensive team, we'll be the best team in the league. I don't know if that's possible, but I think they're going to give a good effort, especially later on once, to be a top 5-ish defensive team. I think they can do it. Like when Embiid is being Embiid defensively, like it's really hard to score. So hopefully they can just like have him find that stride as a defensive anchor.
Yeah, and this again, they're gonna have to figure it out. They're gonna have to find a balance, but like he's not gonna be able to bring that every single night and score 40 points every single night. And like it is unfair to ask him to cover up for as many mistakes as he does and does very well. But also like as far as the just being locked in, like I don't have a ton of confidence that like that changes. Like we've seen playoff games where this Sixers team has not shown up for. We've seen games in the postseason when everything should be on the line. Against the Heat last year is one that jumps out where they just kind of like once they went down, it's like like even after the Joel return when they moved it to 2-2. After that, it felt like a pack in the bags, and it's like guys, like it frustrates me that I feel there are plenty of Sixers fans and Sixers people that care about this more than some of the players seem to sometimes. And I don't know what there is to change that outside of each one of these guys, like looking in themselves and having a little wake up call or whatever. But it's very frustrating, and really like I don't see very, very high hopes of that changing or without that.
Yeah, and I agree, and I definitely like, and it's frustrating. Friday will be a good game, I think, fun one. And I think something to consider as we go through all of this, and every season's a roller coaster. Like it's never gotten better. Like I feel like we've always been waiting for it to just like die down a bit. It never does. No. It never does. We're vets now, man. We've been doing this for a while. We're starting to see the other side of these things, but it's still early, man. Like they're 24 games into the season. There's still 58 games left, which feels like so many when you put it that way. So there's still a ton of time, and they haven't played a lot together. So I'm just gonna ride the wave. We're in low tide right now. It's not the best, but I'm gonna remain positive, stay upright on the surfboard. We're gonna keep going. The next wave is coming. Tyrese will be back soon, and then hopefully they can start building on top of that and stay healthy through the rest of the season. But I don't know, man. It definitely is. It takes a toll when they're constantly. We're kind of like yearning for them to care as much as we do, and that's like a shitty feeling to have as a fan. So I definitely feel you on that end.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this before we exit out of here. I tweeted this out today, so not sure if you saw it, but for anybody watching, we'll go through. So 24 games in this season. In games that just Joel Embiid has played, James Harden has not. The Sixers are 5-4. In games that James Harden has played, Joel Embiid has not. Sixers are 2-1. In games where neither James Harden nor Joel Embiid have played, Sixers are 3-2. In games with both James Harden and Joel Embiid, these Sixers are 2-5. Just not what you want to see at this stage in the season.
No comment. I'm gonna let that. Yeah, man, that's not great. That's not great at all. That's not an encouraging number by any means. But it's small sample size, very small sample size. So we'll take that for what it is with a grain of salt, as they say. And the Sixers play on Friday, so we'll just see if we can improve that record on Friday. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Against the Lakers, who are 8-2 in their last 10, AD playing some terrific basketball. So I'm excited about the AD versus Embiid matchup. He does tend to get up for those, so should be a good one. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. James, thanks for hopping on with me once again.
Sure.
Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already, and we will talk with you next time.